So I want to ask you then, in terms of the different sports, obviously you're based in the US, there's some big sports over there, obviously American football, basketball, which are quite well known to be quite ahead in terms of analytics. So what would you say, or can you judge which sport is maybe ahead of is there a kind of a ranking system which would you say is more advanced than others when it comes to sports analytics?
Yeah, I mean, baseball is definitely the North Star, and there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, they get to play 162 matches, just so many different matchups. Like football, as much as we'd love to say, like, yeah, one day we're gonna really solve this, like we're never gonna get over the problem that there's like 38 matches in a domestic league, one home, one away.
Yeah.
Um, you know, there's just not enough matches. And when you get down to women's football, it's even worse. The
Yeah.
women's game just isn't really playing enough matches for like data analytics to have as much impact as we would like. But yeah, baseball, I mean, it's so much easier. Like we look at it and we're like, oh my God, what an easy sport. But they also invest so much more. So I think the example that I've been using is the Oakland Athletics last season lost over 100 games, and they have at least 15 people working on data analytics, which is like more than any football club in the world.
Mm.
Um, so that's the level of investment that they're requiring to lose 100 matches. So, the clubs that are actually winning 100 matches, they're at the like 30,
Yeah.
40. And, it's not just modelers, but, they have complete software platforms and all sorts of things like this so that, any information that a decision maker wants at any point in time, they can just bring it up and they have it. And they do a whole lot in terms of like education so that they know that the person making that decision, seeing that information, knows exactly what it means, which I think in football, we maybe don't do as good of a job in that. So yeah, I mean, football is obviously never going to be baseball. But I think, in terms of the other American sports, it's really taking off in American football, where there's a much more level of investment there. And I think there's just like a more, I guess, like openness in the culture because you look at baseball, you know that every single successful team is using analytics, whereas I think in our football, there's still teams that aren't using analytics that are successful. And so I think that leads to a little bit more hesitancy. And again, it comes back to this problem of like the work that's being done inside clubs, isn't necessarily convincing enough that they're going to risk their jobs on it. So they would invest and
Yeah.
then they
Yeah.
don't hire more people. But yeah, I mean, we're definitely a lot further ahead than we were when I got started. So it's not all doom and gloom, but until we can figure out how to kind of clone these guys and get them to play, 5 times a week, I think it's going to
Yeah.
be difficult.
So, if somebody said, right, Sarah, you can work in sports analytics, but you can't work in football anymore, which sport would you want to go to as the next kind of career move?
Might be basketball,
Okay.
or maybe cricket. I don't know.
Yeah.
My husband is Indian, so he's gotten me pretty into cricket. The U.S. obviously just had an amazing win over Pakistan a couple days ago, so I think it's pretty interesting. But yeah, I mean, growing up, I grew up in Boston, which is a great sports city. I loved all the Boston sports teams. I just not a fan of American sports anymore. So I think that's a hard question.
Yeah, no problem. So, is there any? I mean, do you keep? I mean, I'm presume you would kind of keep up to date with different kind of trends and kind of things that's going on within the industry. But do you also keep eyes on the other sports in terms of do you take things that you see maybe in a basketball, a piece of a report that you've seen that you could apply to football? Like, do you keep tabs on different sports and do you bring ideas from across from different places?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in the early days of football analytics, I think people were trying to kind of copy things too much, like one for one.
Mm.
The sports are just so different that you really can't do that. But I think there is definitely like some inspiration that you can take, and like just talking to people in baseball. I mean, seeing how many resources they have, it's like, well, that's one thing we should
Yeah.
definitely bring into to football. But I think, the level of investment they have in infrastructure
Mm.
is quite inspirational. Or, how do they handle aging curves is something that maybe translates quite easily across sports. Whereas, how do you handle, international transfers or league transitions? There's not really a sport in the world that kind of has to deal with it the way that our football does. So I think you have to kind of like pick and choose um, where you find that inspiration. And the irony is my going back to the Markov chains paper, but that was actually inspired by an American football paper written by somebody named Keith Goldner. So yeah, I'm a big believer that like there are very few like truly original ideas, and a lot of it is taking inspiration from other locations and just figuring out the right way to apply everything.
Yeah,